नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So, thank you all very much for joining today's session. So, we have been discussing from the 5th verse of Manasiksha by Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. And in that, we started discussing the commentary by Srila Bhaktivigyan Goswami Maharaj. So, we will chant the verse, see the meaning, and then we will continue with our discussion. Okay. असच्चेष्टा कष्टप्रद विकट पाशालिभिरिह प्रकामं कामादि प्रकटपतपाति व्यतिकरैः गले बद्ध्वा हन्येऽहमिति बकविद्वर्त्मपगणे कुरु त्वं फुट्कारानवति सयतात्वं मनयिता. So here Srila Raghunath Das Goswami says, while here on the revealed path of devotion, okay, so the path is the path of devotion. Vyatikaraihi, I have been attacked by the gang. I means I, the traveler, which means the sadhaka, has been attacked by some highway robbers, he says. The gang, so the highway robbers are lust, anger, greed, etc., which he says prakamam kamadi. So, and he says gale badwa, so the neck, so they are choking my neck, he says. They have bound my neck. So what is that neck? So neck indicates one's devotional progress, right? And the act of binding the neck means choking our devotional progress. So what is choking the devotional progress? The rope. So what is the rope? He says, Vikata Pashalibiriha. So the dreadful ropes are asat cheshta, are the wicked deeds which are inspired by lust, anger, greed, etc. That is binding the person, right? So what is the solution? He says, Kurutvam futkaran. Futkaran means loud crying. Scream out for help. So what should I scream? He says, Hanyeham, Hanyeham. Cry, indicating that my spiritual, I am dead, I am dying like that. So what is the meaning of I am dying? Meaning my spiritual life is dying. Why? Because of indulgence in these activities which are impelled by lust, anger, greed, etc. And then he says, Hanyeham iti kurutvam futkaran. Unto whom? He says, Bakabid Vartmapagane. The protectors of the path leading to Krishna, the killer of Bakasur. So you cry out to them, then they will come and help you. So, and then we saw why here Krishna is addressed as Bakabid, the killer of Bakasur, and the devotees are addressed as Bakabid Vartmapa, the protectors of the path leading to Krishna, the killer of Bakasur. We saw last time that Bakasur is the personification of duplicitous cruelty. Duplicity, you can say. And the only means of overcoming duplicity is when you experience affection. So devotees, by giving affection, will help us overcome duplicity. Because we want to show duplicity to people who are mean to us, who are judgmental towards us. But when we experience affection, unconditional affection, then we don't mind sharing our weakness with people, because we know that despite all our conditionings and whatever, this person has genuine affection for me. So when you experience that, then we don't want to hide anything from them, right? So in this way, he's suggesting, Raghunath Das Goswami suggested that crying out for help is what will help us overcome this the influence of these highway robbers of lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion, and pride. So now we were discussing, and we had discussed that crying out for help means we should feel comfortable crying out for help, which means we must have a nice established relationship with them, with the devotees. Only then we will feel comfortable. Otherwise, we will feel embarrassed. We don't want to ask for help. So therefore, we discussed that this involves, crying out for help involves creating a strong foundation where we feel comfortable crying out for help, which means to invest in the 6 exchanges: dadati pratigranati guhyamakyati prichati bhunkte bojayate cheva shadvidam priti lakshanam, right? So in this way, then we feel comfortable crying out for help. So in this context, we discussed from Bhaktivigyan Goswami Maharaj commentary. So Maharaj says this is a very important verse for us. So he says, asat cheshta means false attempts or futile attempts or futile efforts. And he says that so that our life consists of full futile efforts. And Maharaj quotes literature from Russia about the golden calf. So in that he quotes this author who says that the fate of a man who has been striving after 1,000,000 rubles. Rubles means the Russian currency. So he has been striving for 1,000,000 rubles, and after he actually got 1,000,000 rubles, he realized that actually the dream of an idiot has come true. He considered himself an idiot like that. So in this way, our efforts are as in Bhagavatam words, soham nrinam kshulla sukaya dukkam mahadgatanam viramaya tasya pravartaye Bhagavatam Puranam yadaha sakshat Bhagavan Rishibhyah. So in this way, Maitreya Muni says that why am I writing this Bhagavatam? So why I spoke this Bhagavatam? He says, soham nrinam kshulla sukaya mahadgatanam dukkam. People of this, because Maitreya Muni says, my dear Vidura, I have observed that people in this world, for getting insignificant pleasures, they are engaging in tremendous distress. For insignificant pleasure, they are involved in tremendous distress. Tasya viramaya. I want to put a full stop for this futile endeavors. So what is the solution? He says, pravartaye Bhagavatam Puranam. I have spoke this Bhagavatam so that people understand what is a worthy endeavor, so that they don't endeavor for futile things. Like that he says. So same thing, in Russian, through Russian literature, Maharaj is presenting the same thing. Right? So then he says, this Pashalibir means rope, and they have tied us. Okay, so tying means you cannot move, which means you are bound to act in a particular way. For example, if a cow is tied to a pole, then it has to go around that radius circle only. It can eat the grass. It cannot go beyond that. It is bound literally. It is helpless, right? So that is the meaning of being bound. So similarly, activities impelled by lust, anger, greed, etc. also bind us, in the sense we become helplessly addicted to these kind of activities. So even if we want to get away, the addiction is so strong that we cannot get away. So binding is a very subtle binding. It's not gross binding with a gross, you can say like a rope or something. It is a very subtle rope. It is the ropes of vasanas. So, so by the ropes of vasanas we are bound, and this activities impelled by kama, krodha, lobha, etc. completely bind us, right? So yeah. So then he says that we think that, oh, I need some money, just a little, I have to just reach my financial goal, like that. And then that financial goal keeps very ever so imperceptibly increasing and increasing and increasing, to meet with the inflation and the increase of a family member, and increase of house rent, and then it keeps going on and on and on and on, like that, right? And in this way, Maharaj says, many people say that 30 years have passed, but I realize that I have not made much of a spiritual progress. Okay, so like that. And he says that in doing that, we don't progress much spiritually, but on top of that, we end up accumulating more and more material impressions, which bind us still more powerfully, right? So therefore, then he started speaking about the first of them, prakamam kamadi. So kama adi, it is not just kama, but it starts with kama. Kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, like that. So prakamam kamadi, the chief of that gang is kama, lust. She says kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, right? He says they are all like a family of thugs or highway robbers. And out of nowhere they jump on the traveler, and they start tying them up with these kind of activities which are impelled by these emotions. So he says that the highwaymen are not just robbing us, but they are killing us, right? So so then he says, then Maharaj talks about, where is this kama born out of? So he quotes this verse from the sixth chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Sankalpa prabhavan kaman tyaktva sarvan asheshatah. So he says that kama is born out of sankalpa. So sankalpa is subtler than kama. He says, what is this sankalpa? Yes, sankalpa means I want to enjoy. Then kama takes a particular form of enjoyment. Okay. So I was sharing last time that, during in our college days, during semester exam times, we used to do lot of night outs, and just the week before the exam or during the week of the exam, it used to be very stressful, and then once the last exam comes, you are already planning, because you have had such a stressful fortnight almost, and you really are aching for some enjoyment. So you have decided already that the weekend we are going to I'm going to enjoy. So that is sankalpa. And as soon as the last exam gets over, then you find out, hey, which are the movies that are going on, which restaurant we should go, what I should order. So like that. So that is kama. That has taken a more generic, specific shape, but it is born out of something more subtler, the desire to enjoy, right? So So sankalpa is a more generic determination to enjoy, and kama is when it takes a very specific shape, right? So, and he quotes from Chaitanya Charitamrit. He says that kamera tatparya nijat sambhoga kevala krishna sukha tatparya matra premata prabala. So kamera tatparya, the interpretation or the explanation of kama is that it is nija sambhoga, the desire to please our own self and our own and ourself only, kevala. So the root of lust is ultimately the desire for our own satisfaction, which in its turn is derived from the fact that we have left Krishna and turned away, right? So he says that the main issue, the main problem is we have turned our face away from Krishna. Ishadapetasya. And the stages, step by step, what happens, we saw. Ishadapetasya. When the living entity turns his face away from Krishna, then tan Maya yato, then Maya Devi catches him. And how does she affect that jiva? Viparyayo asmriti. Asmriti means it first makes him forget that his constitutional position of being a soul. This is the avaranatmika shakti of Maya. Then viparyaya means it makes him falsely identify with the body. This is the prakshepatmika shakti of Mahamaya. So when he forgets who he really is and he starts identifying with the body, then what follows is dvitiya abhinivesh. Dvitiya means that which is not soul, which means matter. Abhinivesh means absorption. He becomes absorbed in his body and things connected to the body which can give him gratification. So he becomes attached to that, right? Then finally what happens is bhayam syat. There is fear of samsara, right? Because as a soul he wants to enjoy everything permanently, but none of the things of this world are permanent. They are all temporary. So there is constant fear. And the most powerful attachment that he has is towards his body. So death is the most fearful thing. So sometimes abhinivesh is said to be, is explained to be the fear of death. Because of all the fears for losing temporary, the greatest fear is to lose the body, actually. Because by that we lose everything else we are attached to. At one stroke we lose, right? So so it leads to bhayam, like that. Therefore, in any spiritual discipline, a person must somehow or other solve this problem, right? So so in that he again quotes this verse, sankalpa prabhavan kaman, that lust is simply the personification of all our material desires, subtle and gross, right? So he says, sa nischayena yoktavyo yogo anirvinna chetasa. So this yoga must be practiced with determination, anirvinna chetasa, without depression, which means we may not immediately have success, but if success is not immediately coming, then we should not feel dejected and depressed. He says, get up and move ahead. Then you fall down, you get up and move ahead. Don't stop. And giving up completely all sense objects as well as impressions arising from desire. Sarvan sankalpa prabhavan kamam tyaktva asheshatah. One should completely give up all sense objects as well as impressions arising from desire. Controlling all our senses by the mind and by the intelligence, like that he says. So this is the advice that Krishna gives. So he says, sankalpa prabhavan kaman, when a person sees some sense object and wants to enjoy it, this gives rise to all kinds of material desires, and the advice he gives is to give up all sense objects. To give up all sense objects means actually take the senses away from sense objects, or rather the most sustainable thing is give Krishna conscious engagements to the senses. Okay. And then he says, then subsequently control the mind using the intelligence, right? Like that. So then he says he says that to get rid of kama, we have to give up all sense objects along with the vasanas, all the imprints of pleasure. So if we have to give up kama, two things. One is the visible sense objects in front of us should go away, and the memory of our past enjoyment in the form of vasanas, they should also go away, right? So he says, therefore, Baldev Vidyabhushan, explaining 6.24, says that we have to give up all these vasanas with the help of mind. So how do we do that? He says, by analyzing what am I, but he says, by analyzing how good they are, which means he is suggesting that perform a cost benefit analysis. Okay. So he says, perform a cost benefit analysis by understanding, well, I feel a deep urge to indulge in this kind of gratification, but what am I going to gain? And what will I lose? Okay. In return, can I pay this cost? Can I afford to pay the cost? Because anytime, right from a young age, we all have this experience. We get desire to enjoy something, but then when you see the price, then you realize that you can't enjoy. Then we tone down our expectations. He says same thing. So we may not here see how much we have to pay in terms of money, but we have to think how much we have to pay in terms of our devotional credits, because eventually we will end up losing our devotional credits. So he says that one should wonder how much devotional credits I'm going to lose by this. And thinking in this way, one should give it up, like that he says. Right? So this is using intelligence to control the mind. So next he is going to discuss the explanation of this verse given by Ramanujacharya. But before we go there, one important theme that we discussed last time, I just want to touch on that point because it's a very important point, and I just want to touch on that theme. Okay, so just hold on. I will just add a slide. So we had discussed this verse by Narottam Das Thakur. I am sure you remember Narottam Das Thakur. He says, Kama Krishna Karmarpane. Right? Krodha Bhakta Dveshi Jani. Lobha Sadhu Sangha Harikata. Right? Moha Ishta Labhavine. Right? And then he says, next line, I will just try to find that out. This is I will try to find it out in the this thing, and I will share it. This is very interesting because we had this long discussion last time, and I want to touch that point. This is because this is a very important point about dovetailing our these propensities. Okay, so I will just hold on 1 second. I will just share that screen. This is very interesting point that we discussed. I want to touch this point again and see if there is any discussion on this. Just hold on. Kama Krishna Karmarpane. Okay, I got it. I will just zoom it so that you can see it on the screen. So I'm sharing the screen with you. I hope you can see it. So this is Narottam Das Thakur in his Prema Bhakta Chandrika. He says, Kama Krodha Lobha Moha Mada Matsarya Damba Saha Stane Stane Niyukta Kariba Ananda Kari Hridaya Ripu Kari Parajaya Anayase Govinda Bhajiba. So even though many times we say, look, here he says, he talks about dovetailing Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, but Matsarya is not mentioning. But in the previous verse, he actually says about Matsarya. He says, Kama, lust, Krodha, anger, Lobha, greed, Moha, illusion, Mada, pride, Matsarya. Mada is madness, Matsarya, envy, Damba is pride. Saha, Stane Stane Niyukta Kariba. I will engage it appropriately. So he is talking about engaging Matsarya also. Even though sometimes people say, oh, he is not talking about dovetailing pride, which means pride cannot be dovetailed. As if everything else can be dovetailed, right? So, but in reality, actually, is he talking about that kind of dovetailing that needs to be seen? So, what does he say? He says, Kama Krishna Karmarpane, which means whatever lust I have or attachment I have, I will engage it in Krishna's service. Well, does it happen like that in reality? Right? In reality, it does not happen like that, right? If we have lust, we can't just, if someone is feeling lustily attracted towards a girl, let's say, you cannot say, look, you don't have to give up lust. Instead of feeling lusty towards the girl, you feel lusty towards the deities, or you feel attracted towards the deities. Does attraction develop like that? Is it, you cannot dovetail, certain actions can be dovetailed. Attachment to certain actions can be dovetailed. Like if someone likes to drive cars, then he can dovetail that propensity to drive devotees to wherever they want to go. He can drive a car by taking devotees to wherever they want to go. That kind of this thing can be done. But gross attraction towards the opposite sex, and these things cannot be dovetailed like that. So basically, and Krodha Bhakta Dveshi Jane. So yeah, he says that, oh, you want to become angry. Instead of becoming angry at your enemy, become angry at someone who hates devotees. Now the question is, does it happen like that? Let's say if I have a lot of anger towards one of you, let's say I have lot of anger towards Radha Damodar Prabhu, and because of because of many different experiences that we have had before, and I'm seething with anger, and I want to really do something to him. And just at that time, someone comes to me and he says, look, don't give up your anger. But instead of feeling angry towards Radha Damodar Prabhu, start feeling, you dovetail that anger towards this stranger. Will that happen like that? Huh? Kama Krishna Karmarpane, Krodha Bhakta Dveshi Jane, Lobha Sadhu Sange Harikatha, and divert your greed. So if someone is very greedy towards accumulating money, okay, you tell, look, I see that you're very greedy. You don't have to give up your greed. Just that instead of feeling greedy towards money, feel greedy towards sadhu sangha, feel greedy towards harikatha. Does it happen like that? Can you dovetail it like that? Moha ishta labha vinay. If someone feels very delusion, let's say a drunkard feels very delusion when every day evening he takes a bottle of liquor, and on that particular day he has no money, and no one is willing to give him money also. So he feels delusioned completely, and you go and tell him, look, you don't have to give up your delusion. Just think, just like you are feeling delusion without having the bottle of wine, just think, you don't have Krishna, so feel delusion for Krishna. Does it happen like that? So, I mean, these are, this is not the kind of dovetailing that Narottam Das Thakur is suggesting here. We cannot dovetail these emotions like that. For that, first we have to develop, we have to actually develop a deep attachment to these things first. So kama has to be towards things related to Krishna. Kama here means not lust, kama here means attachment. So whatever we have attachment for, when that is taken away, it will lead to krodha. Right? So kamat krodho bijayate. So basically what Narottam Das Thakur is suggesting here is gradually by change of your value system, he says gradually by change of your value system, develop attachment to Krishna and his tadiya, and things connected to Krishna, people connected to Krishna, places connected to Krishna, right? So develop attachment towards them. That is what he is. Sorry, can't see the board. I thought I had shared the screen, but okay. So, so he says that is one thing. He says gradually develop attachment towards Krishna and his tadiya, so that the second point is the most important point, which is the stage of spiritual perfection in devotional service is not devoid of emotions. So basically he is giving us hope that in devotional service you don't have to stop emotions. There is ample scope for expressing your emotions, whether it is kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. In the perfected stage of devotional service gives one full scope for expressing one's emotions. So one need not fear that, oh, will I become dull, dumb like a stone, expressionless? And I had one of my friends, of course he's still a friend, so he used to attend our discussions, and one day with very deep concern, genuine concern, he was almost at the verge of tears, I mean, he was not crying, but he was like very, very deeply concerned. He said, Prabhu, tell me one thing, that what if I realize that my eternal position in Goloka Vrindavan is that of a stone? Will I get stuck up there as a stone, or will I get a chance to go further and become a Gopa or a Gopi? Is that possible? Or will I be eternally stuck as a stone? So, I mean, you can see why he feels like that. It's a very natural feeling, because no one wants to be emotionless. Even if it is a negative emotion, we want to experience it, exhibit it, and receive it from others. If people just walk past you without any emotions, we don't like to stay there. We don't want to stay there. So we don't want to be an emotionless person or thing. So he was deeply feeling, at least I have to be some person who can exhibit my emotions. I don't want to be a stone in Vrindavan. Of course, the stones in Vrindavan are not emotionless. The stones of Vrindavan are all full of emotions for Krishna. They exhibit those emotions in their own way. So, the stones of this material world are Jadavastu. They are insentient objects. But in the spiritual world, even stones are perfectly sentient. They have very deep-rooted, sweet emotions towards Krishna. But he was superimposing his, understanding of a material stone, and he said, "What will happen if I just become a stone?" So, because this is a natural feeling. No one wants to be emotionless. They want to experience emotions and exhibit emotions. And Narottam Das Thakur, through these um, um, bhajans, is indicating that the stage of spiritual perfection is filled with sweet, positive, empowering emotions. You don't have to fear. So you will not merge into the Brahma Jyoti and lose your individuality, where there is absolutely no scope for exhibiting your emotions. There is full scope for emotional expression in the spiritual world. How? Kama Krishna Karmarpane, Krodha Bhakta Dveshi Jane, Lobha Sadhu Sange Harikata, Moha Ishta Labha Vine, Stane Stane Niyukta Kariba, or like that, he says. So this is something that we discussed last time, that, I don't know, in some context we discussed, but I just wanted to touch this point because this is a very important point, because they cannot just like that be dovetailed like that. Lust means, oh, okay, yeah, lust can be dovetailed in Krishna's service. How will you do that? Because one is Atmendriya Preeti, another is Krishnendriya Preeti. It's like two opposite poles that needs a kind of cultivation over a period of time. Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam. That cultivation gradually leads to our attachment to Gurau, Goshte, Goshtalayeshu, Sujane, Bhusuragane, Somantre, Srinamni, Vrajanavayuva, Dvandva Sharane. So like that, you gradually develop attachment to things connected to Krishna, people connected to Krishna, places connected to Krishna. And when that attachment develops, automatically Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, everything will align itself with respect to pleasing Krishna in a way that would be pleasing to Krishna. Like that. So this is where we ended our discussion last week, and this week we were going to start discussing Ramanujacharya's explanation of the 6th chapter verse. But before we get into today's discussion, if there are any quick comments, questions, discussion points based on what we have discussed till now and what we discussed last week, you can please raise your hands. So there are few hands up. Let me just put my earphone. Yes, Madhavi Gopi Mataji, I am unmuting you.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mati.
Yeah, Dandavat Prabhuji. Prabhuji, thank you. Actually, last whole week I was thinking about the thing which you explained, that Kama Krishna Karmarpane, when we are saying whether it is why we are relating only the Kama to, lusty desires itself, but because that verse in the Bhagavad Gita which we learned, that Kama Isha Krodha Isha Rajoguna Samabhava, and that also it is mentioned that the pure desire to love Krishna, when it is adulterated, it gets converted into Kama, the own Indriya Trupti.
Yeah.
So whenever we are, whatever devotional activities we are doing, we are trying in a way, may not be consciously, but without understanding also what we are doing, we are trying to change our desires of self sense enjoyment to for the pleasure of Krishna.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So that can that be fitted as a Kama Krishna Arpane? That was one thing I was thinking. I don't know, I may be wrong.
Yeah. See, actually, even now we do have Kama Krishna Karmarpane. No one can say no. How many of you have absolutely no attachment to chanting, absolutely no attachment to hearing, absolutely no attachment to serving devotees, absolutely no attachment to honoring prasadam? These are all Krishna karma only. So Kama Krishna Karmarpane, who does not have attachment? We do have, right? But at the same time, but last time everyone said, oh, Kama is difficult to dovetail. Krodha Lobha I can dovetail. Because why we feel like that? When we think of Kama, Kama takes a very perverted meaning to us generally. Kama generally, when we think of Kama, immediately we think in terms of attraction to the opposite sex. But that is one type of Kama. But Kama generally means attachment. So if you take Kama to mean attachment, even now we actually have attachment to Krishna karma. Kama Krishna Karmarpane, Krodha Bhakta Dveshi Jana. And in general, because we do identify with the devotee community as devotees, when someone accuses devotees, even now we become angry. But at the same time, when we do have Krishna, we do have attachment to sense enjoyment also. When someone takes away that sense enjoyment also, we become angry. Lobha sadhu sange harikatha. None of you can say, I can challenge and tell. None of you can tell that you don't have that lobha. Then why are you attending? Week after week, you're joining the Manasiksha session. No one is forcing you to act. You're not going to get a certificate out of it. So this is not a prerequisite for doing anything else. So, but still, because there is some greed, lobha, sadhu sange, harikatha, because there is a like-minded association of devotees here, and there is some discussion of Krishna Katha here. So definitely lobha, sadhu sange, harikatha, like that. So this is all there already, but at the same time, parallelly, we also have these emotions with respect to material things also, right? So therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma explains that the subtle body of a materialist is material. The subtle body of a perfected devotee is spiritual. What is the subtle body? What about the subtle body of a sadhaka? What do you think? Is it material or spiritual?
In makeshift,
Huh?
It is means जैसे कुछ color change होता है या flower is budding. So that time it has not, we can't say it is a full grown flower. At the same time, it is not bud. So
correct.
Sadhaka's subtle body is somewhere in that stage. That's what
so you are right. So actually he says a sadhaka's subtle body is partly spiritual and it is partly material. Okay, so there are some spiritual impressions also, and there are some material impressions also. Okay, so we do, as we, that's why we saw this example, we do have attachment to, you know, when India is playing cricket against Pakistan or something like that, we really want to know, or sometimes we may feel like, oh, did India win? So that desire is also there, but at the same time, arey, today, you know, Maharaj is giving class, I need to go. So there is kama for both karmarpane and Krishna karmarpane, and also for material things, right? So and the same thing, krodha, when someone switches off the TV, when right when you know, in the last over, in last 2 balls, India has to score 4 runs to win. Someone switches off the TV also, we may become angry. Or sometimes when we are planning for the next day to go to temple to attend all the morning program and you know, Sunday feast and all that, and suddenly someone says, no, you cannot go, you know, something is there, we may become angry. So the point is, we do feel for both, and while we are as sadhakas, you know, we do have attachment on both sides. So so it is like that. So gradually a sadhaka settled body is spiritualizing in the work in progress. So gradually from material side, it is slowly becoming more and more and more and more towards spiritual side, like that. So yeah, so gradual, this transition is a very gradual transition.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. And one more thing was like when Krishna went to Mathura, that time Trivakra offered him Chandan and all, and also she was like in Bhakti Shastri studies also we studied that she had some lusty desires for Krishna. Means it was not totally at the spiritual level,
Correct.
like Gopi.
Yeah.
So can that be also taken as an example for, you know, this lust being engaged in Krishna's service because she was feeling that desires for Krishna, or no?
Well, no, not really, because that is still in Bhakti-rasam Sindhu Shila, Rupa Goswami calls it as Kama Praya. Kama Praya means it is not prema, it is almost kama only. Then if it is almost kama, why don't you call it kama? Kama Praya means almost kama. Almost kama, why? She says that her only credit is that she felt materially lusty towards Krishna. The object of love was Krishna. If it was anything else, it would have been kama. And just because the object of love, object of lust was Krishna, it is called as kama praya, almost kama. So if the object of lust is Krishna, why not call it prema? Prema is Krishnendriya Preeti Icha Tare Bali Kam. So if it is Krishnendriya Preeti, it is sorry, Tare Bali Prem, then it is Prem. But this was Atmendriya Preeti. She wanted to derive sense gratification from Krishna, not give pleasure to Krishna. But because that object was Krishna, so therefore some benefit is given to her. But that is not exactly dovetailing, actually. That is not dovetailing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I saw, did Brajvinod Sham Prabhu raise his hands? Prabhu, I am unmuting you. Did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I had a question, Prabhu, but I thought it was irrelevant. I could have asked you later. But generally, one of the things which you said now is that the perfection of bhakti is not boring. But I see generally in many temples that the more senior the devotee, they are less participating in general activities and they sort of become more serious. So is that like a mark of maturity, or is it like Lokavichar that they're very much they're senior and hence they don't interact in public? I don't understand. So
I'm still trying to understand and process your question. So when it is your observation that when devotees become more serious,
yeah. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, I am not able to hear.
Am I audible, Prabhu, now?
Yeah, now I am able to hear.
So
I think it was problem
you
with my internet.
yeah, you started rephrasing my question and then I lost you.
Yeah. So yeah, I was telling. I was just trying to understand your question. I think you mentioned that it was your observation that the more senior devotees were becoming, the lesser and lesser enthusiastic they were. They seem to be in participating in temple activities. Is that what you meant, Prabhu?
No, I'm saying it's like, for example, they're in public and then they don't participate in dances. They don't interact much with people. So it becomes like that. Is it like only my observation? Maybe my observation itself is wrong.
I don't know. It can be a generalization.
Yeah.
Prabhuji,
That's why I lowered my hand. So
no. That could be a generalization because spending time in Krishna consciousness need not necessarily translate into devotional maturity. These are two different things. It's a very complex psychological phenomenon. I would suggest when I'm talking about devotional growth, I'm not just talking about chronological years spent in Krishna consciousness. I'm talking about devotional maturity. Sometimes what happens, people due to improper understanding of the philosophy and improper emphasis, many times people become emotionally very numb when they grow in Krishna consciousness, which is actually this is an analysis which His Holiness Purnachandra Swami Maharaj he does in one of his very beautiful books, which is called as Unspoken Obstacles on the Path to Bhakti. I don't know if you have heard of this book.
No, not heard of this.
Yeah, this is a very wonderful book, Unspoken Obstacles on the Path to Bhakti. So in that he speaks of this particular phenomenon. So he shared this example. He was a teacher by nature, and within ISKCON also, for maximum duration of time, his service was to teach shastras at various places. So many times he was observing devotees. He was seeing that observing devotees actually exhibiting this thing. He said that whenever in his Bhakti Shastri class, there used to be new people who had spent less than 1 or 2 years in Krishna consciousness, he saw that they were very enthusiastically participating in his classes. So when he would become angry, then he could see that their facial expressions would change. They would become more sober and serious. When he would become jovial, they would join him and their faces would become jovial. When he would become when he would give a warning, they will immediately pick up their pen and write down that warning. But he saw that people who had spent 4, 5, 6, 10 years in the ashram and attending that course, he could not observe any emotions in their face. Like they say, poker faced. I don't know if you know. So poker faced means it's an expression where, when you are playing poker, so poker is like a gambling using cards. So when people are playing poker, you should be very careful. Very expert poker players will not express their excitement or disappointment through their faces, because the opponents are very expert in reading it, and accordingly they will play. So you have to maintain a very poker face, which means you cannot show your expression. So he was telling that they were like completely emotionless. When I would get excited, they would be the same. When I would get very serious, they would be the same. When I would be very jovial, they would be the same. No expression. So he says why this happens. He says this is especially, this was true with the maybe devotees staying in the ashram. So he mentioned this very important point, that many times we, especially in the renounced order of life or in the brahmachari ashram, there is lot of emphasis on sense control. So he said that when devotees emphasize, when there is lot of emphasis on sense control, then he says that over a period of time, in trying to control their senses, they end up controlling emotions also, which may be sometimes very favorable for one's progress on the path of devotion. So they end up feeling, subtly it creates an impression in them that emotions are obstacles to my progress on the path of devotional service. But this is not true actually. That is why sometimes they become emotionally very callous sometimes if they are not very careful. You may tend to see people very emotionally very callous. I have caught myself many times that way, where a householder devotee I've observed, when he sees suffering, there is a lot of empathy, but when I see the same, I am not able to generate that much empathy as another devotee would. And if you ask me if I was like this all the time, no. But then why have I become like that? If you observe and you see a pattern in people around you also, that over a period of time, there is a sense of system-induced emotional callousness, which may be system-induced or due to improper understanding of the system. So these are like, I mean, I am surprised you observed. I'm not surprised you observed, but I am surprised that you brought out. This could be one of the reasons where, an improper understanding and application of philosophy can actually lead to certain kind of psychological malfunctioning, where we end up, rather than suppressing our senses, sensual urge, one ends up suppressing one's emotions, which are favorable for Krishna consciousness also. So that way, over a period of time, gradually it piles up and it leads to sort of, loss of enthusiasm and things like that. I don't know if that is relevant to what you spoke.
Yes, so almost completely relevant. So this is what I wanted to say, that emotionally they seem, they seem a bit mute emotionally. And,
Yeah.
My observations were more in terms of participating, in terms of being enthusiastic like a new bhakta. That enthusiasm is lost It's like, oh, Bhagavatam class, I've seen the Bhagavatam class. Oh, I've heard this. So like that, if everybody, if I just want to avoid this pitfall if it is a pitfall.
It is definitely
if it is a
pitfall,
mark of
bro.
maturity, then I would like to nurture. And if it is a
No,
mark
please don't
of
nurture
maturity,
it.
I would like to nurture it.
No, I think I
Yeah.
answered your question.
So yeah.
It's
Yes,
very
yes, you did,
unlikely
you
that
did.
it's yeah, it is definitely not a mark of maturity, because as and when one progresses in devotional service, the one of the telltale evidence of real progress is the heart becomes softer and softer, which means one can clearly you will see that he becomes less and less selfish, more and more sensitive to other people's suffering, more the qualities of empathy and all these things should manifest actually, because this is the symptom of the heart becoming softer and softer. So otherwise something is happening. So when there is some otherwise an improper application of certain principles is happening, or some improper understanding of the philosophical truths is happening, which is leading that person to be very emotionally dull actually. So therefore, if I am becoming more, many times honestly I want to I want to share, sometimes I catch myself I'm I have become quite emotionally dull in one sense. So something is wrong, you cannot uh, um, like sometimes when some of your relatives are either suffering due to some terminal illness or something, many relatives are they're crying, and they're is it my is it my devotional maturity that I am not crying? I am so convinced dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. Sometimes I think like that, but then when it comes to my own needs for enjoyment or something, that selfish enjoyment, I am not detached from that. So which means it's not really detachment which is coming from a spiritual maturity. It is actually I have become emotionally callous. So this is something that needs to be addressed actually. So there are these kind of systemic disorders which are there, if and very very sensitive people who have been properly guided and intelligent enough to accept that guidance, they can identify these things, work on them and overcome them actually. Otherwise over a period of time it becomes a serious obstacle. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Absolutely, Prabhu. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Krishna Rupa Mataji, I'm unmuting.
Prabhuji, I just want to ask something in connection to the just this conversation that's happening about emotionally careless and how to be an expressive person. How I am an overly expressive person actually. I become very jubilant seeing devotees, and I sometimes and for me actually I've been like this right from my childhood. Actually, it's not that you develop or something. It's my inert nature that I have connections with my school teachers also, my college teachers also, my school friends and all, and even with devotees all around the world. Now, sometimes many people misunderstand that, uh, she's an overly expressive person, and maybe she's not of a good character or something like that. But I think my inert nature is that, yeah, I want to help people. I want to, feel their, sadness or happiness or whatever it is, and help them out in whatever way I can. And I've been trying to do this, but many a times, the devotees try to misunderstand in this way that, oh, she's very outgoing person, she's a very extrovert person, and see, it's been for me almost two decades plus in the Krishna conscious movement,
Yeah.
and till date I get these comments, that, oh, she's like, this way. So then, how to deal with this, like, because I can't leave this nature of mine at all. I
Hmm.
am a love. I like to help people. I like to serve people, and I like to keep connections with people. Like, I just had my school teacher who just expired last month.
Mhm.
I was there throughout his, illness. I was there reading the Bhagavad Gita for him. Even after he passed away, all those 13 days, we were reading the Bhagavad Gita. Everything was there. So I am grateful to so many devotees and so many people in my life, which I'm expressive, which I can't leave
Yeah,
this.
yeah, correct, Mataji. What I'm telling is, yeah, that is all right.
Yeah.
That one may be like that from the beginning, but I am telling there are certain things after coming to Krishna consciousness,
Hmm.
after taking up to Krishna consciousness, because there may be people who are introverts right from the beginning or extroverts right from the beginning.
Hmm.
We are not talking about that.
Okay.
I am talking about a kind of change that seems to happen in people, especially in devotees, post their uh, practicing of Krishna consciousness. A kind of emotional callousness which can creep in due to improper understanding and application of the process of Krishna consciousness. We are not talking about people's innate natures.
Okay.
Innate natures may be different. They may be an introvert or extrovert. I'm not talking about that. So in
But
their own introvert way or an extrovert way, whatever it may be, there may be, one may catch oneself becoming more and more emotionally callous. Emotional callousness has nothing to do with being an introvert or an extrovert. So they have their own ways of expressing it or feeling it.
okay.
I'm not even talking about external expressions. I'm talking about internal feelings. So
Feeling.
an extrovert may express his sadness by crying out, but an introvert may internally suffer without expressing it. But the person knows that I'm experiencing deep sadness. Similarly, an extrovert may externally express joy by laughing and jumping and whatever. An introvert may internally feel very, very joyful but not express it outside. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about whatever you may be, an introvert or an extrovert. If we are becoming emotionally callous, we are not able to sympathize with people's emotions or empathize with those emotions. If that ability is going down and down, then what I am suggesting is, or not I am suggesting, Maharaj suggests there, it's probably due to an improper understanding of the philosophy, where when people emphasize too much on sense control, when there is a large emphasis on sense control, along with controlling their senses, very naturally and subtly they start suppressing their emotions, which may be favorable for cultivating Krishna consciousness, like that.
Okay.
Okay, Navadvip Chandra Prabhu, you, I'm unmuting you.
Prabhuji, mine also is a follow-up question to Brajvinood Shyam Prabhu's question. Like, how do we maintain that enthusiasm that we had while we were very new to Krishna consciousness?
One thing is, Madhurya Kadambini explains that when we are very new to Krishna consciousness, that enthusiasm is actually an unrealistic non-sustainable form of enthusiasm. So he calls it as Utsahamayi. Utsahamayi means that which is filled with false confidence. So, like we, there is that enthusiasm of newness, something new you have started, and you think that, wow, and you will see that the person comes to Mangalarti and stands at the, temple gate at 4 o'clock only, when the Mangalarti starts at 5 o'clock. So he comes at 4 o'clock only and waits, which he's so eager to attend the Mangalarti. And then he's chanting and chanting, and he is able to chant 16 rounds and 32 rounds. And he thinks, wow. Then he asks others, how many you chant? 16 rounds. And he says, how many years you have been chanting? And he says, 20 years. And he thinks, wow, he has been chanting for 20 years. He's still chanting 16 rounds. I've been chanting only for 2 days. I've already chanted 32 rounds. So I must be very advanced and things like that. That kind of initial enthusiasm is actually a kind of false confidence. Actually, it is not a very sustainable thing, actually, because in the early days, it is mostly the enthusiasm of newness, a kind of something that he has been introduced to very newly, and there is a lot of enthusiasm or a kind of that is there for a new thing. But when that newness fades away, then he moves into the second stage, which Vishwanath Chakravarti calls as Ghana Tarala. So Ghana Tarala means, Ghana means very thick and Tarala means very thin. Thick and thin practice. So one day he is able to chant 16 rounds, and next day he has zero enthusiasm to pick up the bead bag only. So this is not in one sense actually he has not regressed in his path of devotional service. He has actually progressed. How come when he has come from 32 rounds to 0 rounds, how is it progress? He says, because he has now come in touch with reality. He thought that enthusiasm is it's going to eternally grow. First day 16, second day 32, third day 48, and fourth day 64. In this way, very soon I will start chanting 192 rounds just like Haridas Thakur, he thought. But it does not happen like that. This is like, I think I shared this example. We used to, in our boarding school, we used to have this cross-country races, like 20 kilometers or 25 kilometers race. And actually every Saturday, we used to have this cross-country. Morning, we used to have physical training 6 days a week. And one day we used to have this cross-country every Saturday. So when the new boys, 6th standard, they used to join the school. When the new boys, the first time when the cross-country race would start, you should see them. They would just be sprinting. They would be sprinting so fast. And whereas everyone else would be very slowly, steadily, they will be running. They'll be wondering, wow, in first 100 meters only, we have gained a 50-meter lead over them. So which means when we complete 25 kilometers, before they complete 10, 12 kilometers, we can complete the race. Like that they think. And they are sprinting and sprinting and sprinting. And after half a kilometer, you see, everyone is puffing and panting there. They are not able to, their race gets over in the first half kilometer or 1 kilometer only. Because they thought that this speed is sustainable speed. But then next time onwards, what they do, they realize I cannot sprint and win a marathon. I have to go steady. So they start running slowly. But that running slowly is not really a regression on their part of devotional service. In fact, their first understanding of their first enthusiasm was actually false enthusiasm, and now they have come in touch with reality as to what is realistically sustainable devotional service. So this is one thing, and of course sometimes there may be some genuine sense of enthusiasm which over a period of time people may lose due to committing offenses also. That is also possible.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so yeah, so that is something that I just wanted to discuss. So now we will move ahead and discuss what Ramanujacharya has to say about this sixth chapter, 24th verse. Sankalpa prabhavan kamams tyaktva sarvan asheshatah. So we are talking about the 5th verse of Manas Siksha, Bhaktivigyan Goswami Maharaj's commentary, where he is discussing on this theme of lust, right? Lust, etc. are compared to highway robbers, but he is specifically addressing lust or material attachment actually. So he says, in his purport to verse 624, Ramanujacharya explains this point in a very interesting way. He says that there are two kinds of desires. What are the two kinds of desires? He says, number one, those generated by the mind, and number two, those arising from contact between senses and the sense objects, which Krishna calls in Bhagavad Gita as Yehi Samsparshaja Bhoga. Samsparshaja Bhoga means a kind of bliss that arises when sense objects come in touch with senses, right? He says, and then, so he says that the desire generated by the mind can be easy to give up by using the mind, right? So desires coming out of the mind can be given up by using the mind. For example, he gives an example. Our desire for mundane relationships, because we enjoy through these relationships, is one of the first things we should give up, understanding that they are temporary and ultimately unbeneficial, right? So he says that our desire to establish a mundane relationship with someone. So he says that you think that, oh, if I establish this relationship, then they will be pulling me towards performing all kind of material activities, and because I am attached to him and I would want to please him, I will end up engaging in all types of mundane activities, and in this way I will lose all my time for progressing on the for engaging in Krishna conscious activities. And when I lose all my time to perform Krishna conscious activities, then I will not progress on this path. So in this way, one performs a simple cost benefit analysis, right? And then one can give it up. When death is upon us, no one from among our many relationships can help at that point. Even if we have children, they cannot help us, right? Even if there is a loving wife, still no one can help us. We are face to face with the terrible problems resulting from our karma. At that point, we can cling to the tiny island of Krishna consciousness that we have and start chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then we can rise above all material desires. So he says, so this is how you deal with desires which are born out of the mind, right? He says that this is possible to give it up by thinking about the intangible nature of that pleasure that will come out of it. By making a simple cost benefit analysis, he says one can give it up, right? This is the advice that Krishna gives. He says, with the help of your mind, ponder over the futility and uselessness of all these material pleasures because ultimately you do not need them. They are not going to save you, right? So, okay. So, Nimai Lila Prabhu's quoting Gauranga Prabhu, we can understand Krishna consciousness at the time of death. Sorry, we can understand the relevance of Krishna consciousness at the time of death. Okay. Okay. So he says further on, Ramanujacharya says we should give up the enjoyments arising from the contact between the senses and their sense objects, also by reflecting on the fact that despite all our efforts, we have not got anything in the end. So he says that, "ठीक है, now I have indulged my senses in enjoying the sense object, but at the end, what did I get? Only so much intangible thing. You know, I tried so hard to eat this ice cream, but at the end of it, that's all. This, you know, I have within 2 minutes, the ice cream is over. I am licking the stick more and more, and no juice is coming out of it, right? So he says that, you know, both these kinds of desires which are born out of mind and desires which are born out of the interaction of senses and sense objects, he says that by reflecting on how much effort it takes and do you get any proportionate you know, pleasure out of it, you know, like that. So he says both these kinds can be sankalpa prabhavan kamam tyaktva sarvan asheshatah, right? He says manasaiva indriya gramam viniyamya samantatah shanair shanair uparamed buddhya dhriti grihitaya, right? By concentrated intelligence, which tells you what have you gained, just think about it. So it helps you reflect. So by such reflection, one can give up both these kinds of pleasures, that pleasure which is born out of one's pleasure which is born out of one's mind, or due to interaction between senses and sense objects, like that. Yes, Radha Pramod Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So recently, Nimai Lila Prabhu was sharing that they had one, means they had a Zoom call, means they had one devotee in London, your batch.
Yeah.
So
Janakinath Prabhu.
Yeah, so he's in his last days, suffering with cancer. So
He
that time,
left his body, Prabhu.
oh really?
Yeah, last week he left his body. Oh, it was really glorious, actually. Very glorious way he left his body, actually.
So when they were all having this meeting with him, that time Gauranga Prabhu was sharing that relevance of Krishna conscious we can know at the time of death. Because now when you are telling that at the time of death, not your wife or your relatives or any children, only the small island of Krishna consciousness, the chanting of the holy name, that is the only thing, that is what makes relevance for us. So nothing very relevant.
Yeah.
So just recollecting that, and I was just now recently our Sevan Prabhu's also when I heard, understood that how much is important.
Correct. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for sharing. Okay. So next he talks about the relationship between these enemies. How are they related to each other? How are this lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion, pride, how are they related to each other? So Maharaj writes, this gang of thugs has been friends with us over a long time. So much so that generally we have almost become a member of that gang. So he said, we are so much attached to them that he says that we have almost become a member of that gang. Raghunath Das Goswami says, Prakamam Kamadi Prakata. They have appeared out of nowhere and are led by Kama. Kama Adi. The leader is the Kama. Right? In the Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna calls this enemy of ours Kama Rupam Durasadam. So Kama Rupam Durasadam. Durasadam means very difficult to overcome. Kama Rupam means it has taken the form of lust. Right? Kama Rupa means an enemy in the form of lust. But Kama Rupa also means a gaul. A gaul means a kind of ghost which can take any form. Right? Kama Rupa means one who can take any form he wishes. Right? So Kama means desire, Rupa means form. So this Kama Rupa is the main enemy of the living being, especially the living being who is trying to attain a spiritual nature and has taken to the spiritual path, because others will not realize that it's a problem only. So that is why Arjuna raised this point to Krishna. Ata kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha anichannapi varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. He says, oh, what is it, Krishna, that is pushing me to indulge in these kind of forbidden activities, even though I don't want to indulge in them? Right? So he asked this question. So, but Arjuna is disturbed because Arjuna wants to progress in the spiritual path, and therefore he expresses anichan. I don't want to indulge in this, but still I am forced to indulge. So then Krishna says, Kamayesha Krodayesha Rajoguna Samudbhavan. Oh, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born out of mode of passion, which is pushing you in to perform these various forbidden activities. So, but the very fact that he does not want to do it, he is embarrassed by it, is because he has identified a spiritual path, and that spiritual path has given him a specific value system which has identified that these are forbidden activities. Therefore, he says papam charati. It is a sinful activity like that. Sometimes lust comes to us in undisguised forms, but it may also come to us as a Vaishnava with a tilak and beads saying, let's chant. Because sometimes a person engages in spiritual practice for the sake of some mundane fruits. So he says, lust can also come in the form of Anya Abhilasha while practicing bhakti. Okay. He says that it can come in the form of Anya Abhilasha, other desires also. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye. I want neither money, nor followers, nor beautiful woman, kavitam, nor do I want respect. I want nothing. So we may practice devotional service, and when by practicing devotional service, some kind of form, some kind of fame may come, or respect may come, or followers may come, and we may get carried away by that, right? So that is called as Taranga Rangini, enjoying in the waves of puja labh pratishtha that comes due to one's proper practice of bhakti. He says that is also a kind of lust, he says, right? Kama generates 4 types of anarthas. Okay, so 4 types of anarthas. This he is quoting from Madhurya Kadambini. He says there are 4 kinds of anarthas. First is called as Dushkrutota anartha. Sukrutotta anarthas. Then there is Bhaktiotta anarthas. And then there is Aparadotta anarthas. So these four are Dushkritotta anarthas are sinful desires or are unfavorable desires which are born out of past sinful life. Okay, so we had a past very sinful history, and when we come up to Krishna consciousness, those past impressions, they again and again get activated, and we may get sinful desires, and we may sometimes indulge in those sinful desires also, right? And Sukrutotta anarthas means sometimes you may have desires which are unfavorable to Krishna consciousness due to living a past pious life also. You know, I think I shared this example with you that you know, my mother, because of growing up in a very pious family, once when she got a very exalted, His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj's remnants, she rejected it. She said, I can't eat anyone's juta leftover. It's impossible, right? So, therefore, she says, no, I cannot. It's impossible. So, even though it is very favorable for progress on the path of devotional service, Bhakta Pada Duliyara Bhakta Pada Jal, Bhakta Bhukta Avasheshatina Mahabal. So these are, the foot dust and the foot wash and the food remnants of Vaishnavas or exalted Vaishnavas is said to be very, very favorable for progressing on the path of devotional service. So, due to our pious upbringing also, even though most of the pious impressions are doubtable in Krishna's service, but there could be certain pious impressions which may not be very favorable for progressing on the path of devotional service, right? So those are called as Sukrutotta anarthas. Sometimes you have what is called as Bhaktiotta anarthas. Okay, Bhaktiotta anarthas means due to unfavorable desires born out of proper practice of bhakti. Now, someone may ask, when someone properly practices bhakti, how can it generate anartha? Improper practice only should give anartha. How can proper practice give anartha? He says, C is proper practice of bhakti, anarthas generated due to proper practice of bhakti, and D is anarthas generated due to improper practice of bhakti. Right? How? So when we properly practice bhakti, then we progress on the path of bhakti. When we progress on the path of bhakti, then the Vaishnava community starts observing. So when the Vaishnava community starts observing, then they start appreciating, they start glorifying, we start becoming famous, we start getting a lot of facilities, and sometimes or many times we may get completely carried away by those things. And when we get completely carried away by those things, then we get sort of it's like a digression from our path of devotional service. Puja Labh Pratishtha, right? So this is Bhaktiotta anarthas, and this comes only due to proper practice of bhakti. Because if we are not practicing properly, no one is going to give us any respect or glorification or fame or nothing like that, right? And aparadotta anarthas are unfavorable desires when we start committing offenses towards devotees and devotional objects due to a sense of disrespect. Then that activity, because it is displeasing to Krishna, Krishna plants the seeds of material desires in the heart of those devotees who commit offenses. So we may sometimes, we may not have, sometimes after practicing devotional service for years together, we may find ourselves getting some material desires which we never had even before coming to Krishna consciousness. You know, some sinful desire. It's not that we have a history of indulging in those kind of sinful activities even before coming to Krishna consciousness. Out of nowhere, sometimes we may come face to face with certain kind of unfavorable, sinful desires for which you can trace no history prior to our coming to Krishna consciousness. So where could it have come from? Probably due to aparad. Because sometimes when we commit offenses, Krishna ensures that some seeds of material desires are planted in our heart. Right? So that is also possible. He says that there are these 4 sources of anarthas. He says all of that is generated from kama, he says. So all these things represent obstacles to our bhajan. So they represent obstacles to our bhajan. The anarthas generated by pious or sinful activities are classified in various ways. Okay. So he calls it avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesh. We will not get into details. If Maharaj is not going to get into details, I will not get into details. Long discussion about what exactly it is. Okay. He says, avidya, ignorance, is the original problem of the living entity. When the living being, which is spiritual in nature, identifies itself with this bag of flesh and blood. Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridatuke swadik kalatradishu bhauma ijyati, like that. So he's identifying with the body, that is avidya. All this is the result of our past activities, whether sinful or pious, because of which we have this avidya. Offense generates the most horrible anarthas. Therefore, in Madhurya Kadambini, he talks very briefly about Dushkritota, Sukritota, and Bhaktiyotta anarthas, but there is a very elaborate discussion about Aparadotta anarthas and all the aparads that we can possibly commit and how it affects us, how do we rectify it, and all that. Ultimately, it is precisely our independent, capricious desire to do only what I want that is the heart of committing offenses. Okay, I want to do what I want. That is the cause of committing offenses. In fact, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says the main cause of offense, okay, is, of course, the root cause is a disrespectful attitude. Okay, so there are 2 types of approach to overcoming offensive nature. He says the first is to cultivate an attitude of respect. Okay, so because whenever we have a generic mood of disrespect, it eventually leads to offenses. So we can think that, so how do we treat even non-Krishna conscious things, people, etc.? It could be as simple as, how do you even while we are taking a bath or something, you may move the bucket with your feet. You may say, yeah, it's just a bucket. I am not moving any paraphernalia of the Supreme Lord with my feet. One may think like that. But we should not take these things lightly, because if we catch ourselves moving certain things which we can potentially move using our hand, if we are doing it using feet, I'm just giving an example, then it is probably a sign of disrespect, which means if we have that sense of disrespect, then we cannot avoid offenses towards devotees, because this mood of generic disrespect will carry over to our dealing with devotees also. Sometimes we may feel how I deal with people under me in my office. They are not devotees. I am not committing any offenses to devotees. Yes, but if we deal with those people in a disrespectful way, then that inertia will carry over to our dealings with devotees also. Just like if someone is running a 100-meter race, and I'm sure you must have observed people, or you yourself must have run 100-meter, 200 meters sprint races. So generally, how many of you have seen that people, as soon as they cover 100 meters, can they stop immediately? So generally, they run, after completing the race, they end up running another 10, 20, 30, 40 meters like that. So when they are not, they will not be judged or evaluated for anything that they run beyond the 100 meters. As soon as they touch the 100 meters, their evaluation is stopped. So then why don't they stop as soon as they touch 100 meters? Why they are wasting their energy? Why should they run beyond after they touch the 100 meters? Because that inertia will carry them over for another 30, 40 meters. So similarly, if we have a culture of disrespecting people, objects, even though they may be non-Krishna conscious, then generally that inertia of disrespect carries us into the realm of devotees also, and we will end up disrespecting devotees also actually. So unless we cultivate a generic sense of respect towards all people, then it is impossible to avoid these offenses. Okay, so one thing is to cultivate an attitude of respect. Second, he says inability. This is Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions this in his book Bhajana Rahasya. This inability to follow NOI verse 1. He says, Vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam jihva vegam udaropastha vegam etan veganyo vishaheta dira sarvan apimam pratibimsta sashyat. He says that if one is not able to control the 6 urges, then it eventually leads to offending people. Okay, so if you are not able to vacho vegam, if you are not able to control our urge to speak, then we will definitely end up offending people. If you are not able to control the urge of our mind wandering here and there, then we will think about things unnecessarily, and it will lead to offenses. Krodha vegam, if we are if we cannot control our anger, definitely we will end up offending others, right? And in the same way, tongue, belly and genitals also, if we are not able to control those urges, and if we indulge, then we are inspiring others to offend us actually, because they will see us and they will start judging us, and they will in that way offend us. So if we are not able to control these 6 urges, this becomes one of the main cause of causing offenses. So the antidote is to cultivate an attitude of respect and to try to, as far as possible, try to follow the, control the 6 urges, like that. So he says that of these 4 kinds, Dushkritotta, Sukritotta, Bhaktiyotta, and Aparadotta, he says aparad creates the most horrible forms of offenses, which actually do not get destroyed till one reaches the stage of prema. Actually, if you see Dushkritotta, Sukritotta, and Bhaktiyotta anarthas, they are completely wiped out at the stage of Nishtha. But this Aparadotta anarthas, they are there till prema actually. So therefore, the offenses are very dangerous. He says, if I am driven by this desire, I begin committing offenses to the Guru or the Vaishnavas because they are an obstacle to the realization of my independent desires, my karma. When I want to, when I have that independent desire to enjoy, then whoever comes in the way of my realizing that, then I start committing offenses. As a result, I start considering them to be ordinary people. Right? Finally, the anarthas generated by bhakti are the desire for gain and the desires for honor and respect, puja, labh, pratishtha. Right? Like that. These are also the result of karma. Sometimes people, being aware of this problem of karma, try to overcome it by applying additional efforts into practicing renunciation or vairagya. So as soon as they identify that, yes, I am suffering due to this karma, then they try practicing lot of external vairagya. They may fast a lot or perform some extreme form of austerity. But actually, vairagya is not our practice. I'll give you one example. This couple of devotees shared with me. Well, I feel a little uncomfortable sharing this example, but nevertheless, I will share because it might help some devotees also. So there is a particular doctor somewhere in the part of India where within ISKCON you see waves, different waves of treatment. So sometimes some homeopathic doctor becomes very famous, and after that some allopathic doctor becomes very famous. After that some Ayurvedic doctor becomes very famous. After that some naturopathic doctor becomes very famous, and everyone goes to him. Like that, there are waves that come and go, come and go, come and go, like that. So there was one such wave where there was this one doctor in some part of India who was like a naturopath kind of, and for many of the problems he used to suggest drink 7, 8, 10 liters of water, like that, which is like humanly very, very difficult. You have to really force yourself to do that. It's lot of tapasya actually. So many devotees went, some devotees had some favorable result also, but over a period of time, the devotees observed something very common in them. Whoever took that particular course of treatment, they found that these people started becoming very quickly irritable, intolerant, like that. So because and then someone had analyzed it, and he was sharing that because of the very extreme levels of vairagya that was involved in actually practicing this particular course of medication, actually it makes the heart little hard actually. So when it starts making the heart hard, The symptoms of hard-heartedness are intolerance, irritability, fault finding, like that. So definitely sometimes when we want to address karma, we discussed this in the beginning also, many times in order to suppress, you want to address karma, you want to control your senses, but over a period of time we end up suppressing favorable emotions also, and this leads to a sense of callousness or hard-heartedness, right? Those who practice vairagya as a means of achieving something in spiritual life are just torturing themselves, getting nothing but suffering. So if someone practices something like this, they want to do something extra fasting, extra this, extra that, but in the end they in trying to control their senses, they end up becoming very hard-hearted and callous in their devotional service. So Rupa Goswami was a renounced man, but did he practice vairagya? He says, no, he did not. For him, vairagya was not an end in itself. For him, it was the natural state of his heart, because that is the nature of, that is a byproduct of prema for him, right? Kshantir avyartakalatvam viraktir manashunyata ashabandha samutkanta namagane sadaruchi asaktisthad gunakyane prithistad vasatistale. These are the 9 anubhavas or natural symptoms of prema, right? Kshanti, a natural sense of tolerance. Avyartakalatvam, they can naturally they cannot waste time in any non-Krishna conscious activities. Virakti, a natural sense of detachment, is a byproduct of prema. You don't have to practice it. Virakti will not lead to prema, but prema will naturally lead to virakti. Right? We don't have to externally practice it. Then it leads to hardness of heart. So that's why Rupa Goswami, after describing the 64 limbs, he discusses this theme of how jnana and vairagya are not limbs of bhakti and why they should not be accepted as limbs of bhakti. He says the independent cultivation of jnana or vairagya, he says, hardens the heart. Whereas bhakti, when one tries to progress on the path of bhakti, it softens the heart. It makes the heart softer and softer. Whereas when one practices jnana, which means you have to rigorously present your understanding and ideals to defeat others' opinions, or vairagya, where you have to repeatedly say no, 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 no for sense gratification. And he says these 2 activities actually make the heart very hard, and it is very unfavorable for progressing on the path of devotional service. He says the principle of renunciation, vairagya, begins with austerity. Austerity does not mean that a person is standing on one leg or fasting. Let us consider our attachment to food, Maharaj says. Everyone, even modern scholars who study the human physiology, agree that the average person eats more than needed from a physiological point of view. An average person generally tends to overeat. Even modern day scholars who study human physiology, they come to this conclusion. Why are we so attached to food? For enjoyment or greed? To get strength? Why? He says, no. As soon as we are born, we start eating milk or drinking milk. Since very childhood, even in those who have been raised on artificial milk, an inner psychological association between food and love takes place in a person. So he says, this is, Maharaj is discussing some psychology here. Psychology in itself is not necessarily modern. Psychology means trying to understand a connection between the gross and subtle body. So an explanation of such gross actions to subtle psychology are given in the Vedic system also, the Vedic system of Sankhya, and modern psychology also presents. But observations are common. The explanations may vary, but the observations are common, right? Mother's milk is a manifestation of her love, and the baby sucks and sucks. Usually a baby wants to suck beyond the need for food. The baby sucks for love. So whenever we lack love, we start eating. Right? So why is Maharaj discussing this in terms of austerity? So this is a very interesting analysis. I don't want to start this because it's already 8:56, but this is a very interesting analysis that we are going to do right now. I don't want to start this now because I want to leave a few minutes for some comments, discussions, or questions before we wind up for the day. So I'll just pause and see if there are any quick discussion points before we wind up for the day. I don't want to start a new discussion. If there is any, you can please raise your hands. Venkat Govind Prabhu, before unmuting you, Radha Pramod Prabhu is asking how the devotee left his body. I will send you the link, Prabhu. For those interested, I will send you a link. There are quite a few links, 3-4 links of the memorial program that was conducted. I mean, he was a very, very, very special devotee, actually. We had the good fortune of having his association for more than a year when he stayed with us in Chowpatty and GV. And how he touched people's heart is something very incredible, actually. So interested devotees can just let me know. I will send you some links, and if you get time, you watch that link, watch those links. It will be tremendously inspiring for our spiritual practice, actually. So anyway, Venkat Govind Prabhu, I am unmuting you, and then we will end today's session.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Prabhu.
Yeah, Prabhuji, you said that one of the main anarthas in the beginning of today's class is the kama, and the driving force for the kama is the desire to enjoy. And again, you said that the desire for enjoyment is because of turning away from Krishna. So what is the reason for the jiva to turn away from Krishna?
Well, so this is a very, very natural question, but this cannot be understood at our conditioned state. This is what Srila Prabhupada says. This is what Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. He says that there is an answer to this, but this answer can be understood only at the stage of self-realization. Only at that stage one can really understand. At our conditioned state, the answer to this question cannot be understood. That's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. That's what Prabhupada also says. I mean, this eventually traces back to the jiva fall down issue, actually. How did the jiva fall down? Why did the jiva fall down? Did the jiva really fall down? Was he ever there or not? All these questions, it eventually your question leads there, and it's a natural question. If you remember this question, please do ask in our next session, because I cannot answer it in 2 minutes. But I did answer it in 10 seconds. The answer is that one can understand it only when one actually reaches the stage of prema. That's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so thank you all very much for your patient listening and enthusiastic participation. So hoping to have your association next Tuesday also. So till then we will end. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami Pad ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Srila Bhaktivigyan Goswami Maharaj ki jai, Manasiksha ki jai. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namah. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.